Alright, so, to briefly summarize the last reading. Oh, Elden Ring? Gotcha. Um, we've basically been traveling through Tierm. It's the largest city that Eragon has ever himself been in, and the largest city that we've explored in the novel so far. So it was a lot of just meeting secondary characters. We met, I believe her name is Angela. I don't want to be too mistaken. She should be coming up again soon. She's pretty important. She's a witch, and she has a werecat as a familiar. And since the werecat talked to Eragon, she decided to read Eragon's fate, which is pretty important. She's only done this for 3 other people, and one of them Eragon believes was his mother, who he hasn't seen since he was born. And she pretty much outlined 3 major things: that he was gonna experience a tragic omen, that there was a lot of possibility ahead of him, that he had like branching paths in his future, and there was gonna be a great romance. So he's like, alright, well, I'm gonna age, I'm gonna have a romance in my future, and somebody's gonna die. Possibly. There's like dark foreshadowing in the future, basically. It may likely be death, may not be death. But she mentioned death. Like all those iconic future foretellers do. They always want you to feel like you're gonna die, so you spend more money with them. With Braum? I surely hope not. I do really like Braum, but that would be kind of strange. Too much of an age gap. He's like 14, Braum's like 50 something, maybe even a little older. You gotta remember, Braum remembers when there were dragons, okay? He's that old. He's like, back in my day, we used to ride them bitches for miles. And Eragon's like, I have like the only dragon. So they're like, you know, a generation apart. A little weird. It'd be like dating somebody's grandfather. In the morning, oh, this chapter's called A Costly Mistake. Dun dun dun. In the morning, Eragon and Braum retrieved their saddlebags from the stable and prepared to depart. Geode greeted Braum, while Helen watched from the doorway. With grave looks, the 2 men clasped hands. "I'll miss you, old man," said Geode. "And you, said Braum thickly. He bowed his white head and then turned to Helen. "Thank you for your hospitality. It was most gracious." Her face reddened. Eragon thought she was going to slap him. Braum continued, unperturbed. "You have a good husband. Take care of him. There are few men as brave and as determined as he is. But even he cannot weather difficult times without support from those he loves." It's like, take care of your man or I will, bitch. I kind of see your headcanon now. Braum will keep flirting with all these men. He bowed again and said gently, "Only a suggestion, dear lady." Eragon watched as indignation and hurt crossed Helen's face. Her eyes flashed as she shut the door brusquely? I'm not even too sure what that means. I actually kind of want to know. That's a very funky looking word. Brusquely. Marked, short, and abrupt. A brusque reply. I've literally never heard of this. Hang on, I'm gonna put it in my stream. Wait, that's not. I'll just type it again. Sighing, Geode ran his fingers through his hair. Eragon thanked him for all his help, then mounted Kadak. With the last farewell said, he and Braum departed. At Tierm's south gate, the guards let them through without a second glance. As they rode under the giant outer wall, Eragon saw movement in a shadow. Solemnbum, the werecat, was crouched on the ground, tail twitching. The werecat followed them with inscrutable eyes. As the city receded into the distance, Eragon asked, "What are werecats?" Braum looked surprised at the question. Why the sudden curiosity? "I heard someone mention them in Tierm. They're not real, are they?" said Eragon, pretending ignorance. "They are quite real. During the Riders' years of glory, they were as renowned as dragons. Kings and elves kept them as companions. Yet the werecats were free to do what they chose. Very little has ever been known about them. I'm afraid that their race has become very scarce recently." "Could they use magic?" asked Eragon. "No one's sure, but they could certainly do unusual things. They always seemed to know what was going on, and somehow or another managed to get themselves involved." Braum pulled his hood up to block a chill wind. "What's Helgreen?" asked Eragon after a moment's thought. Eragon, with all these questions, like, I don't know, I feel like Braum should be a little bit more suspicious, but at the same time, I kind of see why he isn't. He's just like, "Eragon, can you just shut the fuck up, please?" He's like, "I don't really care why you're asking me these questions anymore. You'll see when we get to Draceliona." When Tierm was out of sight, Eragon reached out with his mind and called, "Saphira!" The force of his mental shout was so strong that Kadak flicked his ears at annoyance. Saphira answered, and sped toward them with all of her strength. Eragon and Braum watched as a dark blur rushed from a cloud, then heard a dull roar as Saphira's wings flared open. The sun shone behind the thin membranes, turning them translucent and silhouetting the dark veins. She landed with a blast of air. Eragon tossed Kadak's reins to Braum. "I'll join you for lunch." Braum nodded, but seemed preoccupied. "Have a good time," he said, then looked at Saphira and smiled. "It's good to see you again." "And you too." Eragon hopped to Saphira's shoulders and held on tightly as she bound upward. The wind at her tail, Saphira sliced through the air. "Hold on," she warned Eragon, and letting out a wild bugle, she soared in a great loop. Eragon yelled with excitement as he flung his arms in the air, holding on only with his legs. I mean, a lot bolder than he was a few readings ago, that's for sure. But I don't think I would ever be that comfortable on a dragon, to be honest. We're talking about a girl who doesn't get on elevators because they freak her out. There's no way in hell I would be like, "Whee! It's a fucking dragon! Yeah!" No, I'd be holding, like, hugging the neck, like, "Saphira, put me down. Put me down. Holy shit, this is scary. Put me the fuck down." No, but, like, seriously. I would, like, actively be shooken. Eragon was too initially, but I don't think I would have that growth. At some point, I would, like, not hate it, I guess, but I don't think I would ever be, like, hoopla about it. "I didn't know I could stay on while you did that without being strapped into the saddle," he said, grinning fiercely. "Neither did I," admitted Saphira, laughing in her peculiar way. Eragon hugged her tightly, and they flew a level path, masters of the sky. By noon, his legs were sore from riding bareback. His hands and face were numb from cold air. Saphira's scales were always warm to the touch, but she could not keep him from getting chilled. When they landed for lunch, he buried his hands in his clothes and found a warm, sunny place to sit. Seeing Braum ate, Eragon asked Saphira, "Do you mind if I ride Kadak?" He has decided to ask He had decided to question Braum further about his past. No, but tell me what he says. Eragon was not surprised that Saphira knew his plans. It was nearly impossible to hide anything from her when they were mentally linked. When they finished eating, she flew away as he joined Braum on the trail. After a time, Eragon slowed Kadak and said, I need to tell you, I wanted to do it when we first arrived in Tierm, but I decided to wait until now. About what? Asked Braum. Eragon paused. There's a lot going on that I don't understand. For instance, who are your friends, and why were you hiding in Carvajal? I trust you with my life, which is why I'm still traveling with you. But I need to know more about you, and what you are doing. What did you steal in Gilead? And what is the Tuatha to Orulthrum that you're taking me through? I think that after all that's happened, I deserve an explanation. You eavesdropped on us. Only once, said Eragon. I see that you have yet to learn proper manners, said Braum, grimly tugging on his beard. What makes you think that this concerns you? Nothing, really, said Eragon, shrugging. Just, it's an odd coincidence that you happened to be hiding in Carvajal when I found Saphira's egg, and that you know so much about Dragon War. The more I think about it, the less likely it seems. There were other clues that I mostly ignored. They're obvious now that I look back. Like how you knew of the Razak in the first place, and why they ran away when you approached. And I can't help but wonder if you had something to do with the appearance of Saphira's egg. Eragon's thinking. There's a lot you haven't told us, and Saphira and I can't afford to ignore anything that might be dangerous. Dark lines appeared on Braum's forehead as he reined Snowfire to a halt. You won't wait? He asked. Eragon shook his head maliciously. Braum sighed. That wouldn't be a problem if you weren't so suspicious, but I suppose that you wouldn't be worth my time if you were otherwise. Eragon was unsure if he should take that as a compliment. Yeah, I was kind of confused too, Eragon. Braum lit his pipe and slowly blew a plume of smoke into the air. I'll tell you, he said, but you have to understand that I cannot reveal everything. Eragon started to protest, but Braum cut him off. It's not out of desire to withhold information, but because I won't give away secrets that aren't mine. There are other stories woven in with this narrative. You'll have to talk with the others to find out the rest. Very well. Then explain what you can, said Eragon. Are you sure? Asked Braum. There are reasons for my secretiveness. I've tried to protect you by shielding you from forces that would tear you apart. Once you know of them and their purposes, you'll never have the chance to live quietly. You will have to choose sides and make a stand. Do you really want to know? 4K away from ending stream, you really want to end this awesome narrative? Unbelievable. I couldn't even imagine. So, Eragon, do you really want to know? Hang on one second. I just gotta blow my nose. Bear with me a moment. Eragon's like, fool, I already said yes. I wouldn't be asked if I didn't want to know. Fucking tell me. I cannot live my life in ignorance, said Eragon quietly. A worthy goal. Very well. There is a war raging in Alagasia between the Varden and the Empire. Their conflict, however, reaches far beyond any incidental armed clashes. They are locked in a titanic power struggle, centered around you. Me? Said Eragon, disbelieving. That's impossible. I don't have anything to do with either of them. Not yet, said Braum. But your very existence is the focus of their battles. The Varden and the Empire aren't fighting to control this land or its people. Their goal is to control the next generation of riders, of whom you are the first. Whoever controls these riders will become the undisputed master of Algasia. Eragon tried to absorb Brom's statements. It seemed incomprehensible that so many people would be interested in him and Saphira. No one besides Brom had thought he was that important. The whole concept of the Empire and the Varden fighting over him was too abstract for him to grasp fully. Objections quickly formed in his mind, but all the riders were killed except for the Forsworn, who joined Galbatorix. As far as I know, even those are now dead. And you told me in Carvajal that no one knows if there are still dragons in Algasia. I lied about the dragons, said Brom flatly. Even though the riders are gone, there are still 3 dragon eggs left. All of them in Galbatorix's possession. Actually, there are only 2 now that Saphira hatched. The king salvaged these 3 during his last great battle with the riders. So there may soon be 2 new riders, both of them loyal to the king, asked Eragon with a sinking feeling. Exactly, said Brom. There is a deadly race in progress. Galbatorix is desperately trying to find the people for whom his eggs will hatch, while the Varden are employing every means to kill his candidates or steal the eggs. But where did Saphira's egg come from? How could anyone have gotten it away from the king? And why do you know all of this? Asked Eragon, bewildered. So many questions, laughed Brom bitterly. There's another chapter to all this. One that took place long before you were born. Back then, I was a bit younger, though perhaps not as wise. I hated the Empire. For reasons I'll keep to myself. I wanted to damage it in any way I could. My fervor led me to a scholar, Geode, who claimed to have discovered a book that showed a secret passage into Galbatorix castle. I eagerly brought Geode to the Varden, who are my friends, and they arranged to have the egg stolen. The Varden! However, something went amiss, and our thief got only 1 egg. For some reason, he fled with it and didn't return to the Varden. When he wasn't found, Geode and I were sent to bring him and the egg back. Brom's eyes grew distant, and he spoke in a curious voice. That was the start of one of the greatest searches in history. We raced against the Razak and Morzan, last of the Forsworn, and the king's finest servant. Morzan, interrupted Eragon. But he was the one who betrayed the riders to Galbatorix. And that happened so long ago. Morzan must have been ancient. Disturbed him to be reminded of how long riders lived. So? Asked Brom. Yes, he was old, but strong and cruel. He was one of the king's first followers, and by far his most loyal. As there had been blood between us before, the hunt for the egg turned into a personal battle. When it was located in Gilead, I rushed there and fought Morzan for possession. It was a terrible contest, but in the end I slew him. During the conflict, I was separated from Geode. There was no time to search for him, so I took the egg and bore it to the Varden, who asked me to train whoever became the new rider. I agreed and decided to hide in Carvajal, which I had been to several times before. Until the Varden contacted me, I was never summoned. Then how did Saphira's egg appear in the spine? Was another one stolen from the king? Brom grunted. Small chance at that. He had the remaining 2 guarded so thoroughly it would be suicide to try and steal them. No. Saphira was taken from the Varden, and I think I know how. To protect the egg, Its guardian must have tried to send it to me with magic. The Varden haven't contacted me to... Oh, this is Brom, sorry. The Varden haven't contacted me to explain how they lost the egg, so I suspect that their runners were intercepted by the Empire, and the Razak were sent in their place. I'm sure they were quite eager to find me, as I managed to foil many of their plans. Then the Razak didn't know about me when they arrived in Carvajal, said Eragon with wonder. That's right, replied Brom. If that ass Sloane had kept his mouth shut, they might not have found out about you. Events could have turned out quite differently. In a way, I have you to thank for my life. If the Razak hadn't become so preoccupied with you, they might have caught me unaware. And that would have been the end of Brom the storyteller. The only reason they ran was because I'm stronger than the two of them, especially during the day. He's like, I'm weak at night. As soon as I start getting sleepy, it's over. They must have planned to drug me during the night, then question me about the egg. You sent a message to the Varden, telling them about me? Yes. I'm sure they'll want me to bring you as soon as possible. But you're not going to, are you? Brom shook his head. No, I'm not. Why not? Being with the Varden must be safer than chasing after the Razak, especially for a new rider. Brom snorted and looked at Eragon with fondness. The Varden are dangerous people. If we go to them, you'll be entangled in their politics and machinations. Their leaders may send you on missions just to make a point, even though you might not be strong enough for them. I want you to be well prepared before you go anywhere near the Varden, at least while we pursue the Razak. I don't have to worry about someone poisoning your water. This is the lesser of two evils. And, he said with a smile, it keeps you happy while I train you. Tuatha du Orotharum is just a stage in your instruction. I will help you find, and perhaps even kill, the Razak, for they are as much my enemy as yours. But then you will have to make a choice. And that will be? Asked Eragon. Whether to join the Varden, said Brom. If you kill the Razak, the only way for you to escape Galbatorix's wrath will be to seek the Varden's protection, flee to Serta, or plead for the king's mercy and join him. Even if you don't kill the Razak, you will still face this choice, eventually. Eragon knew the best way to gain sanctuary might be to join the Varden, but he didn't want to spend his entire life fighting the Empire like they did. He mulled over Brom's comments, trying to consider them from every angle. You still didn't explain how you knew so much about dragons. No, I didn't, did I? Said Brom with a crooked smile. That will have to wait for another time. Why me? Eragon asked. What made him so special that he should become a rider? Did you ever meet my mother? He blurted. Brom looked grave. Yes, I did. What was she like? The old man sighed. She was full of dignity and pride, like Garrow. Ultimately, it was her downfall, but it was one of her greatest gifts, nevertheless. She always helped the poor and the less fortunate, no matter what her situation. You knew her well? Asked Eragon, startled. Well enough to miss her when she was gone. As Kadak plodded along, Eragon tried to recall when he had thought that Brom was just a scruffy old man who told stories. For the first time, Eragon understood how ignorant he had been. He told Saphira what he had learned. She was intrigued by Brom's revelations, but recoiled from the thought of being one of Galbatorix's possessions. At last she said, Aren't you glad that you didn't stay in Carvajal? Think of all the interesting experiences you would have missed. Eragon groaned in mock distress. When they stopped for the day, Eragon searched for water, while Braum made dinner. He rubbed his hands together for warmth as he walked in a large circle, listening for a creek or spring. It was gloomy and damp between the trees. He found a stream a ways from the camp, then crouched on the bank and watched the water splash over the rocks, dipping in his fingertips. The icy mountain water swirled around his skin, numbing it. Sorry, all this icy mountain water has got me thirsty. I feel like that's part of the point, right? Really getting descriptive with this random body of water. When they stopped for the day, Eragon searched for water while Braum made dinner. Oh wait, I've read that. An unusual print on the opposing stream bank caught his attention. It was oddly shaped and very large. Curious, he jumped across the stream onto a rock shelf. As he landed, his foot hit a patch of damp moss. He grabbed a branch for support, but it broke, and he thrust out his hand to break his fall. He fell, his right wrist cracked as he hit the ground. Pain lanced up his arm. A steady stream of curses came out from behind his clenched teeth as he tried not to howl. Half blind with pain, he curled on the ground, cradling his arm. "Eragon!" came Saphira's alarm cry. "What happened?" "Broke my wrist. Did something stupid. Fell. I'm coming," said Saphira. "No. I can make it back. Don't come. Tree's too close for wings." She sent him a brief image, like a mental image, of her tearing the forest apart to get at him, then said, "Hurry." Groaning, he staggered upright. The print was pressed deeply into the ground a few feet away. It was the mark of a heavy, nail-studded boot. Eragon instantly remembered the tracks that had surrounded the pile of bodies in Yazuak. "Urgel," he spat, wishing that Zarok was with him. He could not use his bow with only one hand. His head snapped up, and he shouted with his mind, "Saphira! Urgels! Keep Braum safe!" Eragon leapt back over the stream and raced toward their camp, yanking over his hunting knife. He saw potential enemies behind every tree and bush. "I hope there's only one Urgel." He burst into the camp, ducking as Saphira's tail swung overhead. "Stop! It's me!" he yelled. "Oops," said Saphira. Her wings were folded in front of her chest like a wall. "Oops," growled Eragon, running to her. "You could have killed me. Where's Braum?" "I'm right here," snapped Braum's voice from behind Saphira's wings. "Tell your crazy dragon to release me. She won't listen." "Let him go," said Eragon. "Didn't you tell him?" "No," she said sheepishly. "You just said to keep him safe." She lifted her wings, and Braum stepped forward angrily. "I found an Urgel footprint, and it's fresh." Braum immediately turned serious. "Saddle the horses. We are leaving." He put out the fire, but Eragon did not move. "What's wrong with your arm?" "My wrist is broken," he said, swaying. Braum cursed and saddled Kadak for him. He helped Eragon onto the horse and said, "We'll have to put a splint on your arm as soon as possible. Try not to move your wrist until then." Eragon gripped the reins tightly with his left hand. Braum said to Saphira, "It's almost dark. You might as well fly right overhead. If Urgels show up, they'll think twice about attacking with you nearby." "They had better, or else they won't think again," remarked Saphira as she took off. The light was disappearing quickly, and the horses were tied, but they spurred them on without respite. Eragon's wrist, swollen and red, continued to throb. A mile from the camp, Brom halted. "Listen," he said. Eragon heard the faint call of a hunting horn. As it fell silent, panic gripped him. "They must have found where we were," said Brom. "And probably Saphira's tracks. They will chase us now. It's not in their nature to let prey escape." Then two horns winded. They were closer. A chill ran through Eragon. "Our only chance is to run," said Brom. He raised his head to the sky, and his face blanked as he called Saphira. She rushed out of the night sky and landed. "Leave Kadak. Go with her. You'll be safer," said Brom. He raised his head to the sky, and his face blanked as he called Saphira. She rushed out of the night sky and landed. "What about you?" Eragon protested. "I'll be fine. Now go." Unable to mutter the energy to argue, Eragon climbed into Saphira while Brom lashed Snowfire and rode away with Kadak. Saphira flew after him, flapping above the galloping horses. Eragon clung to Saphira as best as he could. He winced whenever her movements jostled his wrist. The horns blared nearby. Sorry, I'm just loving this sound effect now. Bringing a fresh wave of terror. Brom crashed through the underbrush, forcing the horses to their limits. The horns trumpeted in unison, closing behind them, then went quiet. Minutes passed. "Where are the Urkels?" wondered Eragon. A horn sounded, this time in the distance. Did that sound distant? He sighed in relief. Resting against Saphira's neck while on the ground, Brom shook his head. "That was close," said Eragon. "Yes, but we cannot stop until..." Saphira was interrupted as a horn blasted directly underneath them. Eragon jerked in surprise, and Brom resumed his frenzied retreat. Horned Urgels, shouting with coarse voices, burrowed along the trail on horses, swiftly gaining ground. They were almost in sight of Brom. The old man could not outrun them. "We have to do something!" exclaimed Eragon. "What?" "Land in front of the Urgels." "Are you crazy?" demanded Saphira. "Land! I know what I'm doing," said Eragon. "There isn't time for anything else. They're going to overtake Brom." Very well. Saphira pulled ahead of the Urgels, then turned, preparing to drop onto the trail. Eragon reached for his power and felt the familiar resistance in his mind that separated him from the magic. He did not try to breach it yet. A muscle twitched in his neck. As the Urkels pounded up the trail, he shouted, "Now!" Saphira abruptly folded her wings and dropped straight down from above the trees, landing on the trail in a spray of dirt and rocks. The Urkels shouted with alarm and yanked on their horses' reins. The animals were stiff-legged and collided into each other. But the Urkels quickly untangled themselves to face Saphira with bared weapons. Hate crossed their faces as they glared at her. There were 12 of them, all ugly, jeering brutes. Eragon wondered why they did not flee. He had thought that the sight of Saphira would frighten them away. Why are they waiting? Are they going to attack us or not? He was shocked when the largest Urgel advanced and spat. "Our master wishes to speak with you, human." The monster spoke in deep, roaring gutturals. "It's a trap," warned Saphira before Eragon could say anything. "Don't listen to him." "At least let's find out what he has to say," he reasoned, curious, but extremely wary. "Who is your master?" he asked. The Urkel sneered. His name does not need to be given to one as low as yourself. He rules the sky and holds dominance over the earth. You are no more than a stray heir to him. Yet he has decreed that you shall be brought before him alive. Take heart that you have become worthy of such notice. I'll never go away with you, nor any of my enemies, declared Eragon, thinking of Yazuak. Whether you serve a shade, Urkel, or some twisted fiend I've not heard of, I have no wish to parley with them. That is a grave mistake, growled the Urkel, showing his fangs. There is no way to escape him. Eventually you will stand before our master. If you will resist, he will fill your days with agony. Eragon wondered who had the power to bring the Urkels under one banner. Was there a third great force loose in the land, along with the Empire and the Varden? Keep your offer, and tell your master that the crows can eat his entrails for all I care. Ha, that's a nice call to Greek mythology, I like it. Good old Prometheus. Rage swept through the Urkels. Their leader howls, gnashing his teeth. We'll drag you to him then. He waved his arm, and the Urkels rushed at Saphira. Raising his right hand, Eragon barked, Giada! No! Cried Saphira, but it was too late. The monsters faltered as Eragon's palm glowed. Beams of light lanced from his hand, striking each of them in the gut. The Urkels were thrown through the air and smashed into trees, falling senseless to the ground. Fatigue suddenly drained Eragon of strength, and he tumbled off of Saphira. His mind felt hazy and dull. As Saphira bent over him, he realized that he might have gone too far. The energy needed to lift and throw 12 Urkels was enormous. Fear engulfed him as he struggled to stay conscious. At the edge of his vision, he saw when the Urkels staggered to his feet, sword in hand. Eragon tried to warn Saphira, but was too weak. No, he thought feebly. The Eragon crept through towards Saphira until he was well past her tail, then raised his sword to strike her neck. No! Saphira whirled on the monster, roaring savagely. Her talons slashed with blinding speed. Blood spurted everywhere as the Urkel was torn in two. Saphira snapped her jaws with finality and returned to Eragon. She gently wrapped her bloody claws around his torso, then growled and jumped into the air. The night blurred in a pain-filled streak. The hypnotic sound of Saphira's wings put him in a bleary trance. Up, down, up, down, up, down. When Saphira eventually landed, Eragon was dimly aware of Brahm talking. Eragon could not understand what was said, but a decision must have been reached, because Saphira took off again. His stupor yielded to sleep that covered him like a soft blanket. So, that's pretty cool. Eragon used some mysterious magic spell that we don't even fully understand. Actually, I can check the back of the book. The back of the book has a translator. He said, Yada. Yada means break or hit. So he just made like a light beam fist and just like bashed 12 people with his mind. And you know, since he's only been practicing magic up until this point, he's only really attacked somebody with magic one time. It knocked him out for, it seems like, a whole night. You didn't know I was streaming? Yeah! Ford! I put it in the Discord. Welcome in, nobody. Hope things are going well. I was just about to take a very brief break to recover myself. We just finished a chapter. Very cool scene. Eragon fighting in the forest. Broken wrist. He's flying off on Saphira, but then Brahm starts getting attacked. He lands down on his dragon Saphira, And because he's too weak to swing his sword or shoot an arrow, he decides to use magic. And he uses Yada and like shoots beams of light and sends these 12 Urgles flying. And then like as they were like recovering, the ones that were still conscious, Saphira like ripped them apart. And yeah, we're briefly leaving off with Eragon in like a mild coma because he used way more magic than he was like prepared for. And he like thought about it after and he was like, oh, I'm getting weak, dude. Fell off of his dragon, went to sleep. 10 out of 10 magician. Alright, 1 second. Forward kiss, hell yeah. I'm glad that that stuck. That actually does sound pretty badass. Makes me want to watch Spartacus. Alright. Vision of perfection. Eragon twisted under the blankets, reluctant to open his eyes. He dozed. Then a fuzzy thought entered his mind. How did I get here? Confused, he pulled the blankets tighter and felt something hard on his right arm. He tried to move his wrist, but it zinged with pain. He really doesn't remember. The Urgles! He bolted upright. He lay in a small clearing that was empty save for a small campfire, heating a stew-filled pot. A squirrel chattered on a branch. His bow and quiver rested alongside the blankets. Attempting to stand made him grimace, as his muscles were feeble and sore. There was a heavy splint on his bruised right arm. Where is everyone, he wondered, forlornly. He tried to call to Saphira, but to his alarm could not feel her. I want to point out, he injured his left wrist, which is why he used magic with his right arm. But his right arm is the arm that is in a cast. Not his broken wrist, but the arm he used the magic with. He almost lost a fucking limb, not knowing what the hell he was doing. Hell yeah. Definitely, dude. Still hungry, he looked for the saddlebags, hoping to find a chunk of bread. Neither the saddlebags nor the horses were in the clearing. I'm sure there's a good reason for this, he thought, suppressing uneasiness. He wandered about the clearing, then returned to his blankets and rolled them up. Without anything better to do, he sat against a tree and watched the clouds overhead. Hours passed, but Brahm and Saphira did not show up. I hope nothing's wrong. As the afternoon dragged on, Eragon grew bored and started to explore this forest. When he became tired, he rested under a fir tree that leaned against a boulder. It's not just a rock. Oh, it's not just a boulder. It's a rock. Ah, sorry. I needed to make that SpongeBob quote. With a bowl-shaped depression cleared with dew water. Eragon stared at the water and thought about Brahm's instructions for scrying. Maybe I can see where Saphira is. Brahm said that scrying takes a lot of energy. But I'm stronger than he is. In his fucking cast, mind you. He breathed deeply and closed his eyes. In his mind, he formed a picture of Saphira, making it as lifelike as possible. It was more demanding than he expected. Then he said, "Drummer Kopa!" and gazed at the water. Its surface became completely flat, frozen by an invisible force. The reflections disappeared. The water became clear. On it shimmered an image of Saphira. Her surroundings were pure white, but Eragon could see that she was flying. Brahm sat on her back, beard streaming, sword on his knees. Eragon tiredly let the image fade. At least they are safe. He gave himself a few minutes to recuperate, then leaned back over the water. Roran, how are you? In his mind, he saw his cousin clearly. So, again, broken arm, exhausted, just woke up from a power nap of almost killing himself with magic. And this empathetic bastard is like, let me check out my cousin and my dragon. That's cute. I feel like it would be completely reasonable to wait an evening, at least. Let his arm recover first. The water grew still. Then the image formed on its surface. Roran appeared, sitting on an invisible chair. Like Saphira, his surroundings were white. There were new lines in Roran's face. He looked more like Garrow than ever before. Eragon held the image in place as long as he could. Is Roran in Therinsford? He's certainly know where I've been. The strain of using magic had brought beads of sweat to his forehead. He sighed. For a long time was content just to sit. Then an absurd notion struck him. What if I tried to scry something I created with my imagination, or saw in a dream? He smiled. Perhaps I'd be shown what my own consciousness looked like. It was too tempting an idea to pass. He knelt by the water once again. What shall I look for? He considered a few things, but discarded them all when he remembered his dream about the woman in the cell. After fixing the scene in his mind. I mean, maybe this is for the best, though. Eragon using all this magic while he's injured. I feel like it's like working out, right? He's gonna increase his tolerance for using magic, and hopefully his body follows. After fixing the scene in his mind, he spoke the words. I want to say them again. Where are they? Drummer Kopa! He waited, but nothing happened. Disappointed, he was about to release the magic when inky blackness swirled around the water, covering the surface. The image of a lone candle flickered in the darkness, brightening to illuminate a stone cell. The woman from his dream was curled on a cot in one corner. She lifted her head, dark hair falling back, and stared directly at Eragon. He froze, the force of her gaze keeping him in place. Then the woman trembled and collapsed. The water cleared. Eragon rocked back on his heels, gasping. This can't be. She shouldn't be real. I only dreamed of her. How could she know I was looking at her? And how could I have scribed a dungeon that I've never seen? He shook his head, wondering if any of his other dreams had been visions. Oh, it's my Twitch user. If that doesn't work, I might have missed something. There might be like a number that goes with it. Honestly though, I've always wondered that myself. I have very lucid and very bizarre dreams. And I've always wondered like if I'm seeing like alternate realities or like the future, like, you know what I mean? Like, what the hell? It's very, very strange. Am I seeing other people? Like, you know? Very confusing. The rhythmic thump of Saphira's wings interrupted his thought. He hurried back to the clearing, arriving just as Saphira landed. It only lets you type numbers. Oh, that's funky. I don't know then, hang on. I'll have to check. Brahm was on her back, as he had seen, but his sword was now bloody. Brahm's face was contorted. The edges of his beard were stained red. What happened? Asked Eragon, afraid that he had been wounded. What happened? Roared the old man. I've been trying to clean up your mess. He slashed the air with the sword, flinging drops of blood along its arc. Do you know what you did with that little trick of yours? Do you? I stopped the Urkels from catching you, said Eragon, a pit forming in his stomach. Yeah, growled Brahm. But that piece of magic nearly killed you. You've been sleeping for 2 days. There were 12 Urkels. 12! But that didn't stop you from trying to throw them all the way to Tierv, now did it? What were you thinking? Sending a rock through each of their heads would have been the smart thing to do. But no, you had to knock them unconscious so they could run away later. I've spent the last 2 days trying to track them down. Even with Saphira, 3 escaped. I didn't want to kill them, said Eragon, feeling very small. It wasn't a problem in Yazuok. There was no choice then, and I couldn't control the magic. This time it just seemed extreme. Extreme? Cried Brahm. It's not extreme, when they wouldn't show you the same mercy. And why? Oh, why did you show yourself to them? You said that they had found Saphira's footprints. Didn't make any difference if they saw me, said Eragon defensively. Brahm stabbed his sword into the dirt and snapped. I said they had probably found her tracks. We didn't know for certain. They might have believed they were chasing some stray travelers. But what would they think that now? After all, you landed right in front of them, and since you let them live, they'll scramble around the countryside with all sorts of fantastic tales. This might even get back to the Empire. He threw his hands up. You don't even deserve to be called a rider after this, boy. Brahm yanked his sword out of the ground and stomped to the fire. He took a rag from inside his robe and angrily began to clean the blade. Eragon was stunned. He tried to ask Saphira for advice, but all she would say was, speak with Brahm. Hesitantly, Eragon made his way to the fire and asked, would it help if I said I was sorry? Brahm sighed and sheathed his sword. No, it wouldn't. Your feelings can't change what happened. He jabbed his finger at Eragon's chest. You made some very bad choices that could have dangerous repercussions. Not the least bit of which is that you almost died. Died, Eragon. From now on, you're going to have to think. There's a reason why we're born with brains and not rocks. Eragon nodded, abashed. It's not as bad as you think, though. The Urkels already knew about me. They had orders to capture me. Astonishment widened Brahm's eyes. He stuck his unlit pipe in his mouth. No, it's not as bad as I thought. It's worse. Saphira told me you had talked with the Urkels, but she didn't mention this. The words tumbled out of Eragon's mouth as he quickly described the confrontation. So they have some sort of leader now, eh? Questioned Brahm. And you just defied his wishes, insulted him, and attacked his men. Brahm shook his head. I didn't think it could get any worse. If the Urkels have been killed, your rudeness would have gone unnoticed. But now it'll be impossible to ignore. Congratulations! You just made enemies with one of the most powerful beings in Allegasia. Alright. I made a mistake, said Eragon sullenly. Yes, you did, agreed Brahm, eyes flashing. What has me worried, though, is who this Urkel leader is. Eragon shivered. What happens now? There is an uncomfortable pause. Your arm is going to take a couple of weeks to heal. That time would be well spent forging some sense. I suppose this is partially my fault. I've been teaching you how to do things, but not whether you should. It takes discretion, something you obviously lack. All the magic in Allegasia won't help you if you don't know what to do with it. But we're still going at Drasleona, right? Asked Eragon. Braum rolled his eyes. Yes. We can keep looking for the Razak, but even if we find them, it won't do any good until you've healed. He began unsaddling Saphira. Are you well enough to ride? I think so. Good. Then we can still cover a few miles today. Where are Kadak and Snowfire? Braum pointed off to the side. Over there a ways. I picketed them when there was grass. Eragon prepared to leave, then followed Braum to the horses. Saphira said pointedly, if you had explained what you were planning to do, none of this would have happened. I would have told you it was a bad idea not to kill the Urkels. I only agreed to do what you asked because I assumed it was halfway reasonable. I don't want to talk about it. As you wish, she sniffled. As they rode, every bump and dip in the trail made Eragon grit his teeth with discomfort. If he had been alone, he would have stopped. With Braum there, he dared not complain. Also, Braum started drilling him with difficult scenarios involving Urkels, magic, and Saphira. The imagined fights were many and varied. Sometimes a shade or other dragons were included. Eragon discovered that it was possible to torture his body and mind at the same time. He got most of the questions wrong and became increasingly frustrated. When they stopped for the night, Braum grumbled shortly. It was a start. Eragon knew that he was disappointed. Aw, poor Eragon. I mean, he's trying. Nobody just like learns magic, right? If you think of like literally any magic story ever, it always involves the disciple being a jackass with magic. There's nobody in the history of magic who's just a magician. Like the Sorcerer in the Stone, Mickey thinks he's slick. He does something very simple. He brings a broom to life to do his job for him. But he doesn't learn the off switch and can't stop this animated broom. Classic. They made a new Sorcerer's Apprentice with Nicolas Cage. Very similar concept occurs. I'm trying to think of other examples. There's obviously Eragon. People using magic irresponsibly. Let's think. I can't think of any examples in the Harry Potter series, but we will be getting to that eventually. Irresponsible magic users, huh? I don't know. Something I'll consider. Then I'll end up in the comments. Hang on one second. Sorry about that. Brahm's voice always gets me feeling a little bit congested, so I just like to get up and like shake myself off, stretch a little bit. Obviously, clear my throat while I have the mic muted a little bit and get some water. Speaking of, I'm gonna have to fill one of these soon, but I got a second jug, thankfully, which I'm hoping will carry me. Usually I end up having to fill them at some point though. Okay, so next chapter. Master of the Blade. Hoping to do at least like 2 or 3 more. I'm about to see how long this next one is. Bear with me a second. Just so I can kind of plan this out a little bit. Master of the Blade. We're pretty far along already, huh? Oh yeah, we can. The next couple of chapters are all pretty short. Alright, cool. The next day was easier on both of them. Eragon felt better and was able to answer more of Brahm's questions correctly. After an especially difficult exercise, Eragon mentioned his scrying of the woman. Brahm pulled on his beard. You say she was imprisoned? Yes. Did you see her face? Asked Brahm intently. Not very clearly. The lighting was bad, yet I could tell that she was beautiful. It's strange. I didn't have any problem seeing her eyes. But she did look at me. Brahm shook his head. As far as I know, it's impossible for anyone to know they are being scryed upon. Do you know who she might be? Not really, admitted Brahm. If pressed, I suppose I could come up with a few guesses, but none of them would be likely. This dream of yours is peculiar. Somehow you managed to scry in your sleep, something you'd never seen before, without saying the words of power. Dreams do occasionally touch the spirit realm, but this is different. Perhaps to understand this, we should search every prison and dungeon until we find the woman, bantered Eragon. He actually thought it'd be a good idea. Brahm laughed and rode on. Brahm's strict training filled nearly every hour as the days slowly blended into weeks. Because of his splint, Eragon was forced to use his left hand whenever they sparred. Before long, he could duel as well with his left hand as he used to with his right. By the time they crossed the spine and came to the plains, spring had crept over Allegasia, summoning a multitude of flowers. The bare, deciduous trees were russet with buds, while new blades of grass began to push up between last year's dead stalks. Birds returned from their winter absence to mate and build nests. The travelers followed the Tuark River southeast along the edge of the spine. It grew steadily as tributaries flowed into it from every side, feeding its bulging girth. When the river was over a league wide, Brahm pointed at the silt islands that dotted the water. We're close to Leona Lake now, he said. It's only about 2 leagues away. Do you think we can get there before nightfall? Asked Eragon. We can try. Dust soon made the trail hard to follow. The sound of the river at their side guided them. When the moon rose, the bright disk provided enough light to see ahead. Leona Lake looked like a thin sheet of silver beaten over the land. The water was calm and smooth. It did not even seem to be liquid. Saphir was on the rocky shore, fanning her wings to dry them. Eragon greeted her and she said, "The water is lovely. deep, cool, and clear. Maybe I'll go swimming tomorrow, he responded. They set up camp under a stand of trees and were quickly asleep. At dawn, Eragon eagerly rushed out to see the lake in daylight. A white-capped expanse of water rippled with fan-shaped patterns where wind brushed it. The pure size of it delighted him. He whooped and ran to the water. Saphira, where are you? Let's have some fun. The moment Eragon climbed onto her, she jumped out over the water. They soared upward, circling over the lake, but even at that height, the opposing shore was not visible. Would you like to take a bath? Eragon asked Saphira casually. She grinned, wolfishly. Hold on. She locked her wings and sank to the waves, clipping the crest with their claws. The water sparkled in the sunlight as they sailed over it. Eragon whooped again. Then Saphira folded her wings and dived into the lake, her head and neck entering it like a lance. The water hit Eragon like an icy wall, knocking out his breath and almost tearing him off Saphira. He held on tightly as she swam to the surface. With 3 strokes of her feet, she breached it and sent a burst of shimmering water towards the sky. Eragon gasped and shook his hair as Saphira slithered across the lake, using her tail as a rudder. Ready? Eragon nodded and took a deep breath, tightening his arms. This time they slid gently under the water. They could see for yards through the unclouded liquid. Saphira twisted and turned in fantastic shapes, slipping through the water like an eel. Eragon felt as if he were riding a sea serpent. Just as his lungs started to cry for air, Saphira arched his back and pushed her head upward. With 2 powerful flaps, she gained altitude. That's cool. So he has like super sight underwater through Saphira. You can see through like the darkness. Wow, that was fantastic! Exclaimed Eragon. Yes, said Saphira happily. Though it's a pity you can't hold your breath for longer. Nothing I can do about that, he said, pressing water out of his hair. I don't know, it sounds like something magic could cure. Foreshadowing. Once Eragon was dry, he and Brahm saddled the horses and started around Leona Lake in high spirits, while Saphira playfully dived in and out of the water. Before dinner, Eragon blocked Zarok's edge in preparation for their usual sparring. Neither him nor Brahm moved as they waited for the other to strike. Eragon inspected their surroundings for anything that might give him an edge. A stick near the fire caught his attention. Eragon swooped down, grabbed the stick, and hurled it at Brahm. The splints got in his way, though, and Brahm easily sidestepped the wood. The old man rushed forward, swinging his sword. Eragon ducked just as the blade whistled over his head. He growled and tackled Brahm fiercely. They pitched to the ground, each struggling to stay on top. Eragon rolled to the side and swept Zarok over the ground at Brahm's shins. Brahm parried the blow with the hilt of his sword, then jumped to his feet. Twisting as he stood, Eragon attacked again, guiding Zarok through a complex pattern. Sparks danced from their blades as they struck again and again. Brahm blocked each blow, his face tight with concentration. But Eragon could tell that he was tiring. The relentless hammering continued as each sought an opening. Then Eragon felt the battle change. Blow by blow, he gained advantage. Brahm's parries slowed. Eragon easily blocked the stab from Brahm. Veins pulsed on the old man's forehead. Suddenly, confident, Eragon swung Zarok faster than ever, weaving a web of steel around Brahm. With a burst of speed, he smashed the flat of his blade against Brahm's guard and knocked the sword to the ground. Before Brahm could react, Eragon flicked Zarok up to his throat. They stood panting, the red sword tip resting on Brahm's collar. Eragon slowly lowered his arm and backed away. It was the first time he had beaten Rom without resorting to trickery. That's funny. Eragon's like, I had won a few times in the past, but they weren't real wins. I kind of bullshitted. Braum picked up his sword and sheathed it. Still breathing heavily, he said, "We're done for today." "But we just started," said Eragon. Braum shook his head. "I can teach you nothing of the sword. Of all the fighters I've met, only 3 of them could have defeated me like that. And I doubt any of them could have done it with their left hand." He smiled ruefully. "I may not be as young as I used to be, but I can tell you you're a talented and rare swordsman." "Does this mean we're not going to spar every night?" asked Eragon. "Oh, you're not getting out of it," laughed Braum. "But we'll go easier now. It's not as important if we miss a night here or there." He wiped his brow. "Just remember, if you ever have the misfortune to fight an elf, trained or not, female or male, expect to lose. They, along with dragons and other creatures of magic, are many times stronger than nature intends. Even the weakest elf could easily overpower you. The same goes for the Razak. They are not human, and tire much more slowly than we do." "Is there any way to become their equal?" asked Eragon. He sat cross-legged by Saphira. "You fought well," she said. Braum seated himself with a shrug. "There are a few, but none are available to you now. Magic will let you defeat all but the strongest enemies. For those, you will need Saphira, plus a great deal of luck. Remember, when creatures of magic actually use magic, they can accomplish things that could kill a human, because of their enhanced ability." "How do you fight with magic?" asked Eragon. "What do you mean?" "Well," he said, leaning on an elbow, "suppose I was attacked by a shade. How could I block his magic? Most spells take place instantly, which makes it impossible to react in time. And even if I could, how would I nullify an enemy's magic? It seems I'd have to know my opponent's intention before he acted." He paused. "I just don't see how it can be done. Whoever attacked first would win." Braum sighed. "What you are talking about, a wizard's duel, if you will, is extremely dangerous. Haven't you ever wondered how Galbatorix was able to defeat all of the riders with the help of only a dozen or so traitors?" "I never thought about it," acknowledged Eragon. "There are several ways. Some you'll learn about later. But the main one is that Galbatorix was, and still is, a master of breaking into people's minds. You see, in a wizard's duel, there are strict rules that each side must observe, or else both contestants will die. To begin with, no one uses magic until one of the participants gains access to the other's mind." Saphira curled her tail comfortably around Eragon and asked, "Why wait? By the time an enemy realizes that you've attacked, it will be too late for him to act." Eragon repeated the question out loud. Braum shook his head. "No, it won't. If I were to suddenly use my power against you, Eragon, you would surely die. But in the brief moment before you were destroyed, there would be time for a counterattack. Therefore, unless one combatant has a death wish, neither side attacks until one of them has breached the other's defenses." "Then what happens?" Eragon inquired. Braum shrugged and said, "Once you're inside your enemy's mind, it's easy enough to anticipate what he will do and prevent it. Even with that advantage, it's still possible to lose, if you don't know how to counteract spells." He filled and lit his pipe. "And that requires extraordinary quick thinking. Before you can defend yourself, you have to understand the exact nature of the forces directed at you. If you are being attacked with heat, you have to know whether it is being conveyed to you through the air, fire, light, or some other medium. Only once that's known can you combat the magic by, for example, chilling the heated material. It sounds difficult. Extremely, confirmed Brahm. Seldom can people survive such a duel for more than a few seconds. The enormous amount of effort and skill required condemns anyone without the proper training to a quick death. Once you've progressed, I'll start teaching you the necessary methods. In the meantime, if you ever find yourself facing a wizard's duel, I suggest you run as fast as you can. Alright. Bear with me 1 second. I'm going to take a quick restroom break, and then we're going to get on to the mire of Dras Leona. Interesting. Mire sounds pretty cool. Wizard duels in the Eragon universe sound very terrifying and unfair. I mean, the moment one person gets in the other person's mind, they've basically won. It's decided there. Because they can confirm what their opponent's doing. And it's unspoken law that wizards wait for that moment just so they don't destroy each other, that that there will actually be a winner, which I guess makes sense. I mean, what's the point of battling if you're just both gonna get murdered, right? That makes sense to me. So we're going to the mire now, which always makes me think of swamps because of Verona. They lunched at Fossiloft, a bustling lakeside village. It was a charming place, set on a rise overlooking the lake. As they ate in the hostel's common room, Eragon listened intently to the gossip and was relieved to hear no rumors of him in Saphira. The trail Now a road had grown steadily worse over the past 2 days. Wagon wheels and iron-shod hooves had conspired to tear up the ground, making many sections impassable. An increase in travelers forced Saphira to hide during the day, and then catch up with Brahm and Eragon at night. For days, they continued south along Leono's Lake vast shore. Eragon began to wonder if they would ever get around it. So he was heartened when they met men who said that Leona was a day's ride ahead. Eragon rose early the following morning. His fingers twitched with anticipation, the thought of finally finding the Razak. "The two of you must be careful," said Saphira. "The Razak could have spies watching for travelers that fit your description." "We'll do our best to remain inconspicuous," he assured her. She lowered her head until their eyes met. "Perhaps, but realize that I won't be able to protect you as I did with the Urkels. I'll be too far away to come to your aid. Nor would I survive long in the narrow streets your kind favor. Follow Brahm's lead in this hunt. He is sensible." "I know," he said somberly. "Will you go with Brahm to the Varden? Once the Razak are killed, he will want to take you to them. And since Galbatorix will be enraged by the Razak's death, that may be the safest thing for us to do." Eragon rubbed his arms. "I don't want to fight the Razak all the time like the Varden do. Life is more than constant war. There'll be times to consider it once the Razak are gone." "Don't be so sure," she warned, then went to hide herself until night. The road was clogged with farmers taking their goods to market in Leona. Brahm and Eragon were forced to slow their horses and wait for wagons. Although they saw smoke in the distance before noon, it was another league before the city was clearly visible. Unlike Tierm, a planned city, Leona was a tangled mess that sprawled next to Leona Lake. Ramshackle buildings sat on crooked streets, and the heart of the city was surrounded by a dirty, pale, yellow wall of daubed mud. Several miles east, a mountain of bare rock speared the sky with spires and columns, a tenebrous nightmare ship. Near vertical sides rose out of the ground like a jagged piece of the earth's bone. Brahm pointed. "That is Helgrund. It's the reason Leona was originally built. People are fascinated by it, even though it's an unhealthy and malevolent thing." He gestured at the buildings beside the city's wall. "We should go to the center of the city first." As they crept along the road to Leona, Eragon saw that the highest building within the city was a cathedral that loomed behind the walls. It was strikingly similar to Helgrund, especially when its arches and flank spires caught the light. "Who do they worship?" he asked. Brahm grimaced in distaste. "Their prayers go to Helgrund. It's a cruel religion they practice. They drink human blood and make flesh offerings. Their priests often lack body parts because they believe that the more bone and sinew you give up, the less you are attached to the mortal world. They spend much of their time arguing about which of Helgrund's peaks is the highest and most important, and whether the fourth and the lowest should be even included in worship." "That's horrible," said Eragon, shuddering. "Yes," said Brahm grimly. "But don't say that to a believer. You'll quickly lose a hand in penance." At Leona's enormous gates, they led the horses through the crush of people. 10 soldiers were stationed on either side of the gates, scanning the crowd. The houses inside the city were tall and thin to compensate for lack of space. Those next to the wall were braced against it. Most of the houses hung over the narrow, winding streets covering the sky, so it was hard to tell if it was night or day. Nearly all the buildings were constructed of the same brown wood, which darkened the city even further. The air reeked like a sewer. The streets were filthy. A group of ragged children ran between the houses, fighting over scraps of bread. Deformed beggars crouched next to the entrance, pleading for money. Their cries for help were like a chorus of the damned. We don't even treat animals like this, thought Eragon, eyes wide with anger. I won't stay here, he said, rebelling against the sight. It gets better farther in, said Brahm. Right now we need to find an inn and form a strategy. Draceliona can be a dangerous place to even the most cautious. I don't want to remain on the streets any longer than necessary. They forged deeper into Draceliona, leaving the squalid entrance behind. As they entered wealthier parts of the city, Eragon wondered, how can these people live in ease when the suffering around them is so obvious? They found lodging at the Golden Globe, which was cheap, but not decrepit. A narrow bed was crammed against one wall of the room, with a rickety table and a basin alongside it. Eragon took one look at the mattress and said, I'm sleeping on the floor. There are probably enough bugs in that thing to eat me alive. Well, I wouldn't want to deprive them of a meal, said Brahm, dropping his bags on the mattress. Eragon sat his own on the floor and pulled off his bow. What now? He asked. We find food and beer. After that, sleep. Tomorrow we can start looking for the Razak. No matter what happens, make sure that your tongue doesn't loosen. We'll have to leave immediately if we're given away. The inn's food was barely adequate, but its beer was excellent. By the time they stumbled back to the room, Eragon's head was buzzing pleasantly. He unrolled his blankets on the floor and slid under them as Brahm tumbled onto the bed. Just before Eragon fell asleep, he contacted Saphira. We're going to be here for a few days, but this shouldn't take as long as it did at Tierim. When we discover where the Razak are, you might be able to help us get them. I'll talk to you in the morning. Right now I'm not thinking too clearly. You've been drinking, came the accusing thought. Eragon considered it for a moment, and had to agree that she was right. Her disapproval was clear, but all she said was, I won't envy you in the morning. No, groaned Eragon. But Brahm will. He drank twice as much as I did. Trail of oil. What was I thinking, wondered Eragon in the morning. His head was pounding and his tongue felt thick and fuzzy. As a rat skittered under the floor, Eragon winced at the noise. How are we feeling? Asked Saphira smugly. Eragon ignored her. A moment later, Brahm rolled out of bed with a grumble. He doused his head in cold water from the basin, then left the room. Eragon followed him into the hallway. Where are you going? He asked. To recover. I'll come. At the bar, Eragon discovered that Brahm's method of recovery involved imbibing copious amounts of tea and ice water and washing it down with more brandy. When they returned to the room, Eragon was able to function somewhat better. Brahm belted on his sword and smoothed the wrinkles of his robe. The first thing we need to do is ask discreet questions. I want to find out where the cedar oil was delivered and where it was taken. Most likely, soldiers or workmen were involved in transporting it. We have to find those men and get one of them to talk. I'll take your word for it, Best. I don't know if he's my type, though. They left the Golden Globe and searched for warehouses where the cedar oil might have been delivered. Near the center of Draceliona, the streets began to slant upward towards a palace of polished granite. It was built on a rise so that it towered above every building except the cathedral. The courtyard was a mosaic of mother of pearl and parts of the wall were inlaid with gold. Soldiers stationed every 4 yards watched passers keenly. Who lives there? Asked Eragon in awe. Marcus Tabor, ruler of this city. He answers only to the king in his own conscience, which hasn't been very active. They walked around the palace looking at the gates. Ornate houses surrounded it. By midday, they had learned nothing useful, so they stopped for lunch. This city is too vast for us to comb it together. Search on your own. Meet me at the Golden Globe by dusk. He glowered at Eragon from under his eyebrows. I'm trusting you not to do anything stupid. I won't, promised Eragon. Brom handed him some coins, then strode away in the opposite direction. Throughout the rest of the day, Eragon talked with shopkeepers and workers, trying to be as pleasant and charming as he could. His questions led him from one end of the city to the other, and back again. No one seemed to know about the oil. Wherever he went, the cathedral stared down at him. It was impossible to escape. At last, he found a man who had helped ship the cedar oil and remembered which warehouse it had been taken from. Eragon excitedly went to look at the building, then returned to the Golden Globe. It was over an hour before Brom came back, slumped with fatigue. Did you find anything? Asked Eragon. Brom brushed back his white beard. I heard a great deal of interesting things today, not the least of which is that Galbatorix will visit Draceleona within the week. What? Exclaimed Eragon. Brom slouched against the wall. It seems that Tabor has taken a few too many liberties with his power, so Galbatorix has decided to come teach him a lesson in humility. It's the first time the king has left Eragon in over 10 years. Do you think he knows of us? Asked Eragon. Of course he knows of us, but I'm sure he hasn't been told our location. If he had, we would already be in the Razak's grasp. However, this means that whatever we're going to do about the Razak must be accomplished before Galbatorix arrives. We don't want to be anywhere within 20 leagues of him. The one thing in our favor is that the Razak are sure to be here, preparing for his visit. I want to get the Razak, said Eragon, his fist tightening. But not if it means fighting the king. He could probably tear me to pieces. That seemed to amuse Brom. Very good. Caution. And you're right. You wouldn't stand a chance against Galbatorix. Now tell me, what you learned today. It might confirm what I heard. Eragon shrugged. It was mostly drivel, but I did talk with a man who knew where the oil was taken. It's just an old warehouse. I didn't find anything useful other than that. My day was a little more fruitful than yours. I heard the same thing, so I went to the warehouse and talked with the workers. It didn't take much cajoling before they revealed that the cases of cedar oil are always sent from the warehouse to the palace. And that's when you came back here, finished Eragon. No, it's not. Don't interrupt. After that, I went to the palace and got myself invited into the servants' quarters as a bard. For several hours, I wandered about, amusing the maids and others with songs and poems, and asking questions all the while. It's really amazing all the things servants find out. Did you know that one of the earls has 3 mistresses? And they all live in the same wing of the palace? He shook his head and lit his pipe. Aside from the fascinating tidbits I was told, quite by accident, well, the oil is taken from the palace. He went on a whole, side quest. Eragon did not really expect that much enthusiasm. And that is? I didn't either, to be fair. Brom puffed on his pipe and blew a smoke ring. Out of the city, of course. Every full moon, 2 slaves are sent to the base of Helgrind with a month's worth of provisions. Whenever the cedar oil arrives in Drasleona, they send it along with the provisions. The slaves are never seen again. And the one time someone followed them, he disappeared too. I thought the riders demolished the slave trade, said Eragon. Unfortunately, it has flourished under the king's reign. So the Razak are in Helgrind, said Eragon, thinking of the rock mountain. There, or somewhere nearby. If they are in Helgrind, they'll be either at the bottom and protected by a stone door, or higher up where only they can fly, or Saphira can reach. Top or bottom, their shelter will no doubt be disguised. He thought for a moment. If Saphira and I go flying around Helgrind, the Razak are sure to see us, not to mention all of Drasleona. It is a problem, agreed Brom. Eragon frowned. What if we took the place of the 2 slaves? The full moon isn't far off. It would give us a perfect opportunity to get close to the Razak. That's chancy, at best. If the slaves are killed from a distance, we'll be in trouble. We can't harm the Razak if they aren't in sight. We don't know if the slaves are killed at all, Eragon pointed out. I'm sure they are, said Brom, his face grave. Then his eyes sparked, and he blew another ring. Still, it's an intriguing idea. If we're done with Saphira hiding nearby, and, his voice trailed off, it might work, but we'll have to move quickly. With the king coming, there isn't much time. Should we go to Helgrind and look around? It would be good to see the land in daylight, so we won't be surprised. Brom fingered his staff. That can be done later. Tomorrow I'll return to the palace and figure out how we can replace the slaves. I have to be careful not to arouse suspicion, though. I could easily be revealed by spies and courtiers who know about the Razak. I can't believe it. We actually found them, said Eragon quietly. An image of his dead uncle and burned farm flashed through his mind. His jaw tightened. The toughest part is yet to come. But yes, we've done well, said Brom. If fortune smiles on us, you may soon have your revenge, and the Varden will be rid of a dangerous enemy. What comes after that will be up to you. Eragon opened his mind and jubilantly told Saphira. We found the Razak's lair. Where? He quickly explained what they had discovered. Helgrind, she mused. A fitting place for them. Eragon agreed. When we're done here, maybe we could visit Carvajal. What is it you want? She asked, suddenly sour. Let's go back to your previous life. You know that won't happen, so stop mooning over it. After a certain point, you have to decide what to commit to. Will you hide for the rest of your life, or will you help the Varden? Those are the only options left to you, unless you join forces with Galbatorix, which I do not, and will not, ever accept. Softly he said, if I must choose, I cast my fate with the Varden, as you well know. Yes, but sometimes you have to hear yourself say it. She left him to ponder her words. Worshippers of Helgrind. Eragon was alone in the room when he woke. Scrawled onto the wall with a charcoal stick was a note that read, Eragon, I will be gone until late tonight. Coins for food are under the mattress. Explore the city. Enjoy yourself, but stay unnoticed. Brom. P.S. Avoid the palace. Don't go anywhere without your bow. Keep it strong. Eragon wiped the wall clean. They retrieved the money from under the bed. He slipped the bow across his back, thinking, I wish I didn't have to go armed all the time. He left the globe and ambled through the streets, stopping to observe whatever interested him. There were many intriguing stores, none quite as exciting as Angel's herb shop in Tierm. At times he glared at the dark, claustrophobic houses and wished that he were free of the city. When he grew hungry, he bought a wedge of cheese and a loaf of bread and ate them, sitting on a curb. Later, in a far corner of Drasleona, he heard an auctioneer rattling off prices. Curiously, he headed towards the voice and arrived at a wide opening between two buildings. 10 men stood on a waist-high platform. Arrayed before them was a richly dressed crowd that was both colorful and boisterous. Where are the goods for sale? Wondered Eragon. Oh no, Eragon's too innocent. Oh man. Drasleona is seedier than Eragon realizes. The auctioneer finished his list and motioned for a young man behind the platform to join him. The man awkwardly climbed up, chains dragging at his hands and feet. And here we have our first item, proclaimed the auctioneer. A healthy male from the Haderach Desert, captured just last month, and in excellent condition. Look at those arms and legs. He's strong as a bull. He'd be perfect as a shield bearer. Or, if you don't trust him for that, hard labor. But let me tell you, lords and ladies, that would be a waste. He's bright as a nail if you can get him to talk a civil tongue. The crowd laughed, and Eragon ground his teeth with fury. His lips started to form a word that would free the slave. And his arm, newly liberated from the splint, rose. The mark on his palm shimmered. He was about to release the magic when it struck him. He'd never get away. The slave would be caught before he reached the city walls. Eragon would only make the situation worse. He lowered his arms and quietly cursed. Think! This is how you get into trouble with the Urkels. He watched helplessly as the slave was sold to a tall, hawk-nosed man. The next was a tiny girl, no more than 6 years old. Oh, geesh. Wrenched from the arms of a crying mother. As the auctioneer started bidding, Eragon forced himself to walk away, rigid with fury and outrage. It was several blocks before the weeping was inaudible. I'd like to see a thief try to cut my purse right now, he thought grimly, almost wishing it would happen. Frustrated, he punched a nearby wall, bruising his knuckle. That's the sort of thing I could stop by fighting the Empire, he realized. With Saphira by my side, I could free those slaves. I've been graced with special powers. It would be selfish of me not to use them for the benefit of others. If I don't, I might as well not be a rider at all. It was a while before he took stock of his bearings and was surprised to find himself before the cathedral. He's right though, he really is. It's just like old Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. Remember that, Pete. Remember that. That is facts. No matter what sort of power you've been blessed with, whether it's just like having a huge crowd of people that will hear you out and be able to like spread a message, being like Gandhi or like Martin Luther King, or like actually having some like incredible gift like Einstein, like you gotta do what you can, you know? You find that you have some supernatural blessing, you gotta milk it. Recessed in shadow at the cathedral's front was an iron-bound door inlaid with a row of silver script that Eragon recognized as the ancient language. As best he could tell, it read, "May thee who enter here understand thy impermanence and forget thine attachments to that which is beloved. Wild. Sounds very Buddhist, except that I think they're a lot darker and less like welcoming than your typical Buddhist. But same kind of belief, you know, distance yourself from life. Nothing is forever. It's all about the spiritual journey. You know, that's their vibe. They're just edgy. The entire building sent a shiver down Eragon's spine. There was something menacing about it, as if it were a predator crouched in the city, waiting for its next victim. A broad row of steps led to the cathedral's entrance. Eragon solemnly ascended them and stopped before the door. I wonder if I can go in. Almost guiltily, he pushed on the door. It swung open, smoothly, gliding on oiled hinges. He stepped inside. The silence of a forgotten tomb filled the empty cathedral. The air was chill and dry. Bare walls extended to a vaulted ceiling that was so high, Eragon felt no taller than an ant. Stained glass windows depicting scenes of anger, hate, and remorse filled the walls, while spectral beams of light washed sections of the granite with transparent hues, leaving the rest in shadow. His hands were shaded a deep blue. Between the windows stood statues with rigid, pale eyes. He returned their stern gazes, then slowly trod up the center, afraid to break the quiet. His leather boots padded noiselessly on the polished stone floor. The altar was a great slab of stone, devoid of adornment. A solitary finger of light fell upon it, illuminating motes of golden dust floating in the air. This place sounds horrible. 1 out of 10 on Yelp. Or 1 star to 5, I don't know. Clearly, have not actually been on Yelp, but I am rating them very negatively. I at least dust the place. Not gonna judge your taste in statues. Behind the altar, the pipes of an organ pierced the ceiling and opened themselves to the elements. Out of respect, Eragon knelt before the altar and bowed his head. He did not pray, but paid homage to the cathedral itself, the sorrows of the lives it had witnessed, as well as the unpleasantness of the elaborate pageantry that played out between its walls, emanated from the stones. It was a forbidding place, bare and cold. In that chilling touch, though, came a glimpse of eternity, perhaps the powers that lay there. Finally, Eragon inclined and rose. Calm and grave, he whispered words to himself in the ancient language, then turned to leave. Then he froze. His heart jumped. The Razak stood at the cathedral's entrance, watching him. Their swords were drawn, keen edges bloody in a crimson light. A sibilant hiss came from the smaller Razak. Neither of them moved. Rage welled up in Eragon. He had chased the Razak for so many weeks that the pain of their murderous deed had dulled within him, but his vengeance was at hand. His wrath exploded like a volcano, fueled even more by his pent-up fury at the slave's plight. A roar broke from his lips, echoing like a thunderstorm as he snatched his bow. Deftly he fit an arrow to the string and loosened it. 2 more followed instantly. The Razak leapt away from the arrows with inhuman swiftness. They hissed as they ran up the aisle between the pews, cloaks flapping like raven wings. Eragon reached for another arrow, but caution stayed his hand. They knew where to find me. Brahm is in danger. I must warn him. Then, to Eragon's horror, a line of soldiers filled into the cathedral, and he glimpsed a field of uniforms jostling out the doorway. Eragon gazed hungrily at the charging Razak, then swept around, searching for an escape. A vestibule to the left of the altar caught his attention. He bounded through the archway and dashed down a corridor that led to a prior with a belfry. The patter of the Razak's feet behind him made him quicken his pace until the hall abruptly ended with a closed door. He pounded against it, trying to break it open, but the wood was too strong. The Razak were nearly upon him. Frantic, he sucked in his breath and barked, "Shiera!" The light attacked again. With a flash, the door splintered in pieces and fell to the floor. Eragon jumped into the small room and continued running. He sped through several chambers, startling a group of priests. Shouts and curses followed him. The priority bell tolled an alarm. Eragon dodged through a kitchen, past the pair of monks. There were no other exits. Eragon turned to leave, but there was a low hiss at the Razak shouldering aside the door. Desperate, he rushed at the wall, arms pumping. Magic could not help him here. If he used it to break the wall, he'd be too tired to run. He jumped. Even with his arms outstretched, only his fingertips cleared the edge of the wall. Eragon gasped and hung there, struggling not to fall. The Razak prowled into the garden. Eragon sensed their approach and heaved with his arms. His shoulders shrieked with pain as he scrambled under the wall and dropped to the other side. He stumbled and regained balance and started down an alley just as the Razak leaped over the wall. He ran for over a mile before he had to stop and catch his breath. Unsure if he had lost the Razak, he found a crowded marketplace and dived under a parked wagon. How did they find me? They shouldn't have known where I was, unless something happened to Brahm. He reached out to his mind to Saphira and said, "The Razak found me. We're all in danger. Check if Brahm is alright." She was silent, then curtly, "He'll meet you at the inn. Don't stop moving. You're in great danger." "Don't I know it," muttered Eragon. As he hurried to the globe, quickly packed their belongings, saddled the horses, then led them to the street, Brahm soon arrived. "What happened?" "I was in the cathedral when the Razak just appeared behind me. I ran back as fast as possible, but they could be here any second. We have to get outside the city walls before they close the gates. If they haven't already," said Brahm. "If they're shut, it'd be nigh impossible for us to leave. Whatever you do, don't get separated from me." Eragon stiffened as ranks of soldiers marked down one of the streets. Brahm cursed, lashed Snowfire with his reins, and galloped away. They nearly crashed several times during the ride, plunging through masses of people. When the gates finally came into view, Eragon pulled on Kadok's reins with dismay. The gates were already half closed. The double line of pikemen blocked their way. "They'll cut us to pieces," he exclaimed. "We have to try," said Brahm. "I'll deal with the men, but you have to keep the gate open for us." Eragon nodded, gritting his teeth. They plowed towards the line of unwavering soldiers, who lowered their pikes. Though the horses snorted with fear, Eragon and Brahm held them in place. As they neared the pikes, Brahm raised his hand and spoke. The words struck with precision. The soldiers fell to each side, as their legs had been cut out from under them. The gap between the gates shrank by the second. Hoping that the effort would not improve too much for him, Eragon drew on his power and shouted, "Du Grindhuelder!" A deep grating sound emanated from the gates as they trembled, then ground to a stop. The crowd and guards fell silent, startled with amazement. He swayed with the expected fatigue, but managed to keep riding. Brahm watched him with concern. Saphira was waiting for them by the edge of the city. "Go, ride her," said Brahm. "And this time, stay in the air, no matter what happens to me. I'll head south, fly nearby. I don't care if Saphira's seen." "Are you alright?" asked Saphira. "Yes," said Eragon, "but only because we were very lucky. All the time we've spent searching for the Razak was useless." "I know," he said. "If the Razak had been the only enemies back there, I would have stayed and fought, but with all the soldiers, it was hardly fair. You understand that there'd be talk of us now? This was hardly an unobtrusive escape. Invading the Empire will be harder than ever." There was an edge to her voice he was unaccustomed to. "I know." They flew low and fast over the road. Leona Lake was seated behind them. "The wind's too strong." "It's not that bad," objected Brahm. "It is up there," said Eragon. The gale grew stronger, flinging dirt through the air. They wrapped scarves around their heads to protect their eyes. Soon darkness forced them to stop. With only the stars to guide them, they left the road and made camp behind two boulders. It was too dangerous to light a fire. So they ate cold food while Saphira sheltered them from the wind. After the sparse dinner, Eragon asked bluntly, "How do they find us?" "One of the palace servants warned me there were spies among them. Somehow word of me and my questions must have reached Tabor, and through him the Razak. We can't go back to Draciliona, can we?" Brahm shook his head. "Not for a few years." "Then should we draw the Razak out? If we let Saphira be seen, they'll come running to wherever she is. And when they do, there will be 50 soldiers with them. At any rate, this isn't the time to discuss it. Right now we have to concentrate on staying alive. Tonight will be the most dangerous because the Razak will be hunting us in the dark when they are strongest. We'll have to trade watches until morning." "Great," said Eragon, standing. He stepped towards the edge of the camp, trying to see better. "What is it?" asked Brahm as he unrolled his blankets. Eragon stared into the darkness. "I don't know. I thought I saw something. Must have been a bird." Pain erupted in the back of his head, and Saphira roared. Then Eragon toppled to the ground, unconscious. Oh, well, that's not good. Alright. I'm not going to leave us on that cliffhanger, I promise. I'm going to read at least like 2 or 3 more chapters. I'm going to take a quick pause to be like 3 minutes tops. Alright. Without further ado, we're gonna see what's happening to poor Eragon. Sneaking around looking for the Razak. Apparently waste of time. Razak also looking for Eragon. Who knew? Sorry about that, I had to sneeze. Nature calls, you know. Alright. The Razak's revenge. Eragon was just mysteriously knocked unconscious. Probably not a good sign. I always hate when I'm mysteriously knocked unconscious. It's definitely not one of my kinks. Anywho. The Razak's revenge. A dull, throbbing, roused Eragon. Every time blood pulsed through his head, it brought a fresh wave of pain. He cracked his eyes open and winced. Tears rushed to his eyes as he looked directly into a bright lantern. He blinked and looked away. When he tried to sit up, he realized that his hands were tied behind his back. He turned lethargically and saw Brahm's arms. Eragon was relieved to see that they were bound together. But why was that? He struggled to figure it out until the thought came to him. They wouldn't tie up a dead man. But then who were they? He swiveled his head further and stopped as a pair of black boots entered his vision. Eragon looked up, right into the cowled face of a Razak. Fear jolted through him. He reached for the magic and started to voice a word that would kill the Razak, but then halted, puzzled. He could not remember the word. Frustrated, he tried again, only to feel it slip out of his grasp. Above him, the Razak laughed chillingly.
The drug is working, yes? I think you will not be bothering us again.
There was a rattle off to the left, and Eragon was appalled to see the second Razak fit a muzzle over Saphira's head. Her wings were pinned to her sides by black chains. Eragon tried to contact her but felt nothing.
She was most cooperative once we threatened to kill you, hissed the Razak,
squatting by the lantern. Eragon's bags, examining it and discarding various items until he removed Zarok.
What a pretty thing for one so insignificant. Maybe I will keep it.
He leaned closer and sneered.
Or maybe, if you behave, our master will let you polish it.
His moist breath smelled like raw meat. Then he turned the sword over in his hands and screeched as he saw the symbol on the scabbard. His companion rushed over. They stood over the sword, hissing and clicking. At last they faced Eragon.
You will serve our master very well, yes.
Eragon forced his thick tongue to form words. If I do, I will kill you. They chuckled coldly.
Oh no, we are too valuable. But you are disposable.
A deep snarl came from Saphira. Smoke roiled from her nostrils. The Razak did not seem to care. Their attention was diverted when Brahm groaned and rolled onto his side. One of the Razak grabbed his shirt and thrust him effortlessly into the air.
It's wearing off. Give him more. Let's just kill him,
said the shorter Razak.
He has caused so much grief.
The taller one ran his finger down his sword.
A good plan. But remember, the king's instructions were to keep them alive.
Hang on 1 second. Ugh, sorry about that. Dang, sinuses. They always want to act up on reading day, huh? But I will prevail. I march on regardless.
We can say he was killed when we captured them. And what of this one? The Razak asked, pointing his sword at Eragon. If he talks,
His companion laughed and drew a wicked dagger.
he would not dare.
There was a long silence, then
Agreed.
they dragged Brahm to the center of the camp and shoved him to his knees. Brahm sagged to one side. Eragon watched with growing fear. I have to get free.
None of that now,
Said the tall Razak, poking him with his sword. He nosed the air and sniffed. The other Razak growled. He yanked Brahm's head back and swept the dagger towards his exposed throat. At that very moment, a low buzz sounded, followed by the Razak howl. An arrow protruded from his shoulder. The Razak nearest Eragon dropped to the ground, barely avoiding a second arrow. He scuttled to the wounded companion, and they glared into the darkness. Hissing angrily, they made no move to stop Brahm as he blearily staggered upright. Get down! Cried Eragon. Brahm wavered, then tottered towards Eragon as more arrows hissed into the camp from the unseen attackers. The Razak rolled behind some boulders. There was a lull, then arrows came from the opposite direction. Caught by surprise, the Razak reacted slowly. Their cloaks were pierced in places, and a shattered arrow buried itself in one's arm. With a wild cry, the smaller Razak fled towards the road, kicking Eragon viciously in the side as he passed. His companion hesitated, then grabbed the dagger from his side and raced after him. As he left the camp, he hurled the knife at Eragon. A strange light suddenly burned in Brahm's eyes. He threw himself in front of Eragon. His mouth opened in a snarl. The dagger struck him with a soft thump, and he landed heavily on his shoulder. His head lolled limply. No! Screamed Eragon, though he was doubled over in pain. He heard footsteps, then his eyes closed, and he knew no more. This is the next chapter. Murtagh. For a long while, Eragon was aware only of the burning in his side. Each breath was painful. It felt as though he had been the one stabbed, not Brahm. His sense of time was skewed. It was hard to tell if weeks had gone by or only minutes. When consciousness finally came, he opened his eyes and peered at the campfire, feet away. His hands were tied together, but the drug must have worn off, because he could think clearly again. Saphira, are you injured? No, but you and Brahm are. She crouched over to Eragon. Saphira, you didn't make that fire, did you? And you couldn't have gotten out of those chains by yourself. No, I didn't think so. Eragon struggled to his knees and saw a young man sitting on the far side of the fire. The stranger, dressed in battered clothes, exuded a calm, assured air. In his hands was a bow. At his side, a long hand-and-a-half sword. A white horn bound with silver fitting lay in his lap, and the hilt of a dagger protruded from his boot. He's got the boot dagger. He's got to be pretty serious. He appeared to be a few years older than Eragon, and perhaps an inch or so taller. Behind him, a gray warhorse was picketed. The stranger watched Saphira warily. Who are you? Asked Eragon, taking a shallow breath. The man's hand tightened on his bow. Murtagh. His voice was low and controlled, but curiously emotional. Eragon pulled his hands underneath his legs so they were in front of him. He clenched his teeth. Why did you help us? You aren't the only enemies the Razak have. I was tracking them. You know who they are? Yes. Eragon concentrated on the ropes that bound his wrists and reached for the magic. He hesitated, aware of Murtagh's eyes upon him, then decided it didn't matter. Giada! He grunted. The rope snapped off his wrists. He rubbed his hands to get the blood flowing. Murtagh sucked in his breath. Eragon braced himself and tried to stand, but his ribs seared with agony. He fell back, gasping. Murtagh tried to come to his aid, but Saphira stopped him with a growl. I would have helped you earlier, but your dragon wouldn't let me near you. Her name's Saphira, said Eragon tightly. Now let him by. I can't do this alone. Besides, he saved our lives. Saphira growled again, but folded her wings and backed away. Murtagh eyed her flatly as he stepped forward. He grasped Eragon's arm, gently pulling him to his feet. Eragon yelped and would have fallen without support. They went to the fire with Brom lay on his back. How is he? Asked Eragon. Bad, said Murtagh, lowering him to the ground. The knife went right between his ribs. You'll look at him in a minute, but first we'd better see how much damage the Razak did to you. He helped Eragon remove his shirt, then whistled. Ouch. Ouch, agreed Eragon weakly. A blotchy bruise extended down his side. The red, swollen skin was broken in several places. Murtagh put a hand on the bruise and pressed lightly. Eragon yelled and Saphira growled a warning. Murtagh glanced at Saphira. I think you have some broken ribs. It's hard to tell, but at least 2, maybe more. You're lucky you're not coughing up blood. He tore the blankets and strips and bound Eragon's chest. Eragon slipped the shirt back on. Yes, I'm lucky. Took a shallow breath, sidled over to Brom, and saw that Murtagh had cut open the side of his robe to bandage his wound. With trembling fingers, he undid the bandage. I wouldn't do that, warned Murtagh. He'll bleed to death without it. Eragon ignored him and pulled the cloth away. The wound was short and thin, bellying its depth. Blood streamed out of it, as he had learned when Garrow was injured. A wound inflicted by the Razak was slow to heal. He peeled off his gloves while furiously searching his mind for healing words. Help me, Saphira. I am too weak to do this alone. Saphira crouched next to him, fixing her eyes on Brom. I am here, Eragon. As their minds joined together, Eragon drew upon their combined power and focused it on his words. Waste hell, he said. And Brom's skin flowed together as if he had never been broken. Murtagh watched the process. It was over quickly. As the light vanished, Eragon sat, feeling sick. We've never done that before, he said. Saphira nodded. Together we can cast spells that are beyond either of us. Murtagh examined Brom's side and asked, is he completely healed? I can only mend what is on the surface. I don't know enough to fix whatever's damaged inside. It's up to him now. I've done all I can. You probably need to eat, said Murtagh. I will make soup. While Murtagh fixed the meal, Eragon wondered who this stranger was. His sword and bow were of the finest make, as was his horn. Either he was a thief or accustomed to money, and lots of it. Why was he hunting the Razak? What have they done to make him an enemy? Does he work for the Varden? Murtagh handed him a bowl of broth. Eragon spooned it down quickly and asked, how long has it been since the Razak fled? A few hours. We have to go before they return with reinforcements. You might be able to travel, said Murtagh. But he gestured at Brahm. He can't. You don't get up and ride away after being stabbed between the ribs. If we make a litter, can you carry Brahm with your claws like you did the Garrow? Eragon asked Saphira. Yes, but landing will be awkward. As long as it can be done, Eragon said. Saphira can carry him, but we need a litter. Can you make one? I don't have the strength. Wait here. Murtagh left the camp. Murtagh returned with 2 saplings. He laid them parallel on the ground, then lashed the blanket between the poles. After he carefully tied Brahm to the makeshift litter, Saphira grasped the saplings and laboriously took flight. I never thought I would see a sight like that, Murtagh said. Saphira disappeared into the night sky. Eragon limped to Cadoc and hoisted himself into the saddle. Thanks for helping us. You should leave now. Ride as far away from us as you can. You'll be in danger if you're seen with us. We can't protect you, and I wouldn't see harm come to you on our account. A pretty speech, said Murtagh, grinding out the fire. But where will you go? Is there a place nearby that you can rest in safely? No, admitted Eragon. Murtagh's eyes glinted as he fingered the hilt of his sword. In that case, I think I'll accompany you until you're out of danger. I've no better place to be. Besides, if I stay with you, I might get another shot at the Razak sooner than if I were on my own. Interesting things are bound to happen around a rider. It's funny, Angel was literally saying the same thing. Eragon wavered, unsure if he should accept. Yet he was unpleasantly aware that he was too weak to force the issue. If Murtagh proves untrustworthy, Saphira can chase him away. Join us if you wish, he shrugged. Murtagh nodded and mounted his warhorse. An oxborn moon provided wane light, but he knew that it would only make it easier for the Razak to track them. Though Eragon wanted to question Murtagh further, he kept silent. Sorry, I didn't actually mean to silence myself, I just lost my place. Conserving his energy for riding. Near dawn, Saphira said, I must stop. My wings are tired and Brahm needs attention. I discovered a good place. They found her sitting at the base of a broad sandstone formation that curved out of the ground. It's large enough for all of us, including the horses. Follow me. She turned and climbed up the sandstone, sharp claws digging into the rocks. The horses had difficulty, as their shod hooves could not grip the sandstone. Eragon and Murtagh had to pull and shove the animals for almost an hour before they managed. The cavern was a good 100 feet long and more than 20 feet wide, yet it had a small opening that would protect from bad weather and prying eyes. Impressive, said Murtagh. I'll gather wood and fire. Eragon hurried to Brahm. Saphira had set him on a small ledge at the near of the cave. After a few minutes, he sighed and went to the fire Murtagh had built. They ate quietly, then tried to give Brahm water, but the old man would not drink. Stymied, they spread out their bedrolls and slept. Legacy of a Rider. Wake up, Eragon, he stirred and groaned. I need your help. Something is wrong. Eragon tried to ignore the voice. Arise! Go away, he grumbled. Oh, snap! Who's raiding? Hey! Welcome in! Thank you so much! I don't even have my phone up. I have no idea what's happening. Oh, it's Shmoka! Hey! Hey, Shmoka! How are things? What are we all doing? Welcome, welcome. I am reading Eragon, my favorite book. I'm probably going to read one more chapter, and then I'm going to be rating on myself, so feel free to stick around for that. But I will warn, I am 2 hours into reading, and this is our 5th read, so I would be cautious of some spoilers. If you want to possibly follow pop into Discord or the YouTube and I catch up. Probably be for your best. If you've already read or seen Eragon, maybe it won't really matter to you, but you've been warned. But yeah, I'm doing great though. Thanks so much, Crash. I hope you're doing awesome. Oh, you're doing great. You just mentioned. But yeah, I'm doing great. I love this book. Really capturing some newfound appreciation for it. Especially when you reread it and you have like an idea of what's gonna happen, and like the character growth and stuff. You can kind of see how far they've come. Because it's a very long series. We're on page 270 of like, I think 570 actually. 497, that's what it was. And then there's 4 books. So I'm going to be doing this for a while. I read every Monday. Besides that, I also do a lot of For Honor, Brawlhalla, and speedrunning. But I don't really know what I'm going to speedrun next. I have been speedrunning Assassin's Creed. But I only have one more of those to do, which is Revelations. But without further ado, I'm going to continue reading now. Hey Shmoka, welcome in. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. What was going on with your stream today? Wait. Oh yeah, I read that. Eragon's dragon's trying to wake him up, and he's like, "Yeah, whatever. Leave me alone." I'm like, I'm tired. I did a lot of magic yesterday. Eragon. A bell rang in the cave. He bolted upright, fumbling for his bow. Saphira was crouched over Braum, who had rolled off the ledge and was thrashing on the cave floor. His face was contorted in a grimace. His fists were clenched. Eragon rushed over, fearing the worst. You were baking? What were you baking? That's intriguing. I don't suppose it was donuts, was it? Strawberry bread? Ooh, okay, interesting. Strawberry bread. I've never heard of that. Help me hold him down. Is he going to hurt himself? He cried to Murtagh, clasping Braum's arms. Together they restrained Braum until he ceased. Then they carefully returned to the ledge. I don't know why they got this guy who's not feeling the greatest after being stabbed on a ledge. They're like, we could put you on the ground where you're not going to fall to your death, or we can just put you up high and have you roll and break your neck. We're going to just keep like resetting you on the top of this edge. Hey, Mary is a pirate. Welcome in. Hope things are going well with you. I'm doing awesome, thank you. Just reading some Eragon. Love this book. Trying to get into the habit of reading on Mondays, because I do stream nearly every day, so I want to read more to reduce my screen time. Also to like get me back into some of the books I love. After I do Eragon 1, I think we're going to transition into some random Goosebump books. Because I feel like Goosebumps are short enough, I'll be able to do them in a session. And then maybe like, I also have Animorphs, but they're kind of like, Animorphs kind of go in like a category, you know what I mean? Like, it's a continuous story. I would need to like try to rent them. Who's that Pokemon? Oh yeah, you got it. I'm excited. I wonder who 50 is. I know that's Gen 1. Is it Gyarados maybe? Gyarados? I always like to say Gyarados, I don't know. It's just like bored into my brain as Gyarados. This has been many a debate with one of my other Pokemon friends. 50, 52, 51. Haha, Diglett. You know, you're not the first person to want to see cute old Diglett. I can't blame you. Pretty iconic. Diglett! I'll even make it appear like a Diglett. Look like, whoop! Just because I do really love Pokemon, and I want to give you guys a moment of grace before I continue this story. Here's also Doug Trio. They're looking a lot angrier than Diglett. Like, look at that. Look at those eyebrows. What's up with that, huh? They've lived a hard life to become Dugtrios. Diglett looks so, like, cute and ready for the world. Dugtrio just finished a 9 to 5, and he doesn't want any of your shit. Alright, well, thank you for that. Nice Pokemon choice, right? Yeah, I got a huge binder of Pokemon. I have almost all of Gen 1 to Gen 4. I'm only missing like 71 cards, something like that, out of the first like 490. It's kind of intense. I have been working on it like my whole life. I'm pretty proud of it, not gonna lie. Not to toot my own horn or anything. I'm really hoping I can finish it. Part of why I'm showing it off on stream is to familiarize myself with the ones I have. So when I get to like a flea market or something like that, I run into somebody that's trading, I have an idea what I'm looking for. Okay, so they're trying to remedy Braum. How long did he sleep? He asked Saphira. A good while. I've been watching Braum for most of that time. He was fine until a minute ago, when he started thrashing. I woke you once he fell. He stretched, wincing at his ribs, twinging painfully. A hand suddenly gripped his shoulder. Braum's eyes snapped open and fixed a glassy stare on Eragon. You, he gasped. Bring me the wineskin. Braum, exclaimed Eragon. Pleased to hear him talk. You shouldn't drink wine. It'll only make you worse. Bring it, boy. Just bring it. Braum gives me major Kratos energy. He's just, first of all, I called him boy. But also, he's just so, like, I don't know, he's so sassy. He's that, like, reluctant dad figure. He's just like, oh, this fucking kid, man. So much like me, and it pisses me off. How's the book going? I am loving this book, thank you. Have you ever read Eragon or seen the movie before? I'll show you the cover. Quick synopsis, Eragon. Very poor off farm boy. Gets mysteriously blessed with one of the last dragons in existence. And he's currently debating joining a rebel group to rise against an evil king who murdered all the dragons. That's pretty much the story so far. They just got out of a battle where Braum was stabbed in the ribs. And Eragon's like kind of always dying because he thinks he's this great wizard, but he's not. So every time he uses magic, he like kills himself. Like breaks his arm or something. I'll be right back. Hold on. Eragon dashed to the saddlebags and rummaged them frantically. I can't find it, he cried. Here, take mine, said Murtagh. Eragon grabbed it and returned to Braum. I have the wine, he said, kneeling. Murtagh retreated to the cave's mouth so they could have privacy. Braum's next words were faint and indistinct. Good. Now, wash my right hand with it. What? What? Eragon started to ask. No questions. I haven't time. Mystified, Eragon unstoppered the wineskin and poured the liquid onto Braum's palm. He rubbed it into the old man's skin, spreading it around the fingers and over the back of the hand. More, croaked Braum. This is getting weird. Eragon splashed wine onto his hand again. He scrubbed vigorously as a brown dye floated off Braum's palm, then stopped, his mouth agape with amazement. There on Braum's palm was the Gedway Ignatia. You're a rider? He asked incredulously. Eragon didn't know this yet? I'm sorry, but Eragon is an idiot. I thought this was already very clear, right? Alright, here are the signs. Braum taught him magic. Braum mentions that, hey, all the Dragon Riders just happen to have this magical ability that they don't need to necessarily like learn. It's just given to them via their dragon. And then he goes on to mention that he is old as shit and knew the dragon riders and stuff. Like, come on. Like, I don't know. How are you sleeping next to this guy and you don't know he used to have a dragon? He talks to Eragon's dragon as well. There were just so many red flags. I even thought that he had said it at this point in the story. But I'm glad that's what they were getting to and that wasn't some weird situation going on. Confirming, I believe it was Best. It was Best or Ford, I can't quite remember. They're always appearing at the same time. I swear they're like twins. But one of them was thinking that Brahm and Eragon were ended up together. Which would be kind of weird, but you know, not if he rubs wine in Brahm, I guess. It's not that weird. A painful smile flickered on Brahm's face. Once upon a time that was true, but no more. When I was young, younger than you are, I was chosen. Chosen by the riders to join their ranks. While they trained me, I became friends with another apprentice, Morzan, before he was forsworn. Eragon gasped. That had been over 100 years ago. But then he betrayed us to Galbatorix, and in the fighting at Doru Arareba, Vrongard's city, my young dragon was killed. Her name was Saphira. Whoa! Why didn't you tell me this before? Asked Eragon softly. Brahm laughed. Because there was no need to. He stopped. His breathing was labored. His hands were clenched. I am old, Eragon. So old. Though my dragon was killed, my life has been longer than most. You don't know what it is like to reach my age, look back, and realize that you don't remember much of it. Then to look forward, and know that many more years still lie ahead of you. After all this time, I still grieve for my Saphira, and hate Galbatorix for what he tore from me. His feverish eyes drilled into Eragon as he said fiercely, Don't let that happen to you. Don't. Guard Saphira with your life, for without her, it'll be hardly worth living. You shouldn't talk like this. Nothing's gonna happen to her, said Eragon, worried. Brahm turned his head to the side. Perhaps I am just rambling. His gaze passed blindly over to Murtagh. Then he focused on Eragon. Eragon, I cannot last much longer. This is a grievous wound. It saps my strength. I have not the energy to fight it. Before I go, will you take my blessing? Everything will be alright, said Eragon, tears in his eyes. You don't have to do this. It is the way of things. I must. Will you take my blessing? Eragon bowed his head and nodded, overcome. Brahm placed a trembling hand on his brow. Then I give it to you. May the coming years bring you great happiness. He motioned for Eragon to bend closer. Very quietly, he whispered 7 words from the ancient language. Then even more softly, told him what they meant. That is all I can give you. Use them only in great need. Brahm blindly turned his eyes to the ceiling. And now, he murmured, for the greatest adventure of all. I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. The worst part of the book, I swear. Weeping, Eragon held his hand, comforting him as best he could. His vigil was unwavering and steadfast, unbroken by food or drink. As the long hours passed, a great power crept over Brahm, and his eyes slowly dimmed. His hands grew icy. The air around him took on an evil humor. Powerless to help, Eragon could only watch as the Vrazek's wound took its toll. The evening hours were young, and the shadows long, when Brahm suddenly stiffened. Eragon called his name and cried for Murtagh's help. They could do nothing. With shaking fingers, Eragon closed Brahm's eyes and stood. Saphira raised her head behind him and roared mournfully at the sky. Keening her lamentation, tears rolled down Eragon's cheeks as a sense of horrible loss bled through him. Haltingly, he said, "We have to bury him. We might be seen," warned Murtagh. "I don't care." Murtagh hesitantly bore Brom's body out of the cave, along with his sword and staff. Saphira followed them. "To the top," Eragon said thickly, indicating the crown of the sandstone hill. "We can't dig a grave out of stone," objected Murtagh. "I can do it." Eragon climbed onto the smooth hilltop, struggling because of his ribs. There, Murtagh lay Brom on the stone. Eragon wiped his eyes and fixed his gaze on the sandstone. Gesturing with his hand, he said, "Moist dinner." The stone rippled. It flowed like water, forming a body-length depression in the hilltop. Molding the sandstone felt like wet clay. He raised waist-high walls around it. They laid Brom inside the unfinished sandstone vault with his staff and sword. Stepping back, Eragon again shaped the stone with magic. It joined over Brom's motionless face and flowed upward into a tall, faceted spire. As a final tribute, Eragon set runes into the stone. Here lies Brom, who was a dragon rider and like a father to me. May his name live on in glory. Then he bowed his head and mourned freely. He stood like a living statue until evening, when the light faded from the land. That night, he dreamed of the imprisoned woman again. He could tell that something was wrong with her. Her breathing was irregular, and she shook. Whether from cold or pain, he did not know. In the semi-darkness of the cell, the only thing clearly illuminated was her hand, which hung over the edge of a cot. A dark liquid dripped from the tips of her fingers. Eragon could tell it was blood. Damn. What a crazy chapter come into. I'm so sorry for you all. I'm gonna read one more. This one is called Diamond Tomb. It's pretty much in momentum of my favorite character, Brom, who passed way too early. Seriously, we're halfway through book 1, and imagine my surprise knowing there's 3 more books and my favorite character's already gone. I'm like, get rid of the whole thing. No, but seriously, give me 1 second just to like clear my nose. Alright. Here we go. Diamond Tomb. Honestly, still not recovered from that last chapter. I actually thought I was going to tear up a little bit. Surprised I didn't. I felt it building up and I was like, yawn stream. Just breathe. Just breathe. Middle school emotions building up. I'm like, ah. Okay. Anyway, when Eragon woke, his eyes were gritty, his body stiff. The cave was empty except for the horses. The litter was gone. No sign of Brom remained. He walked to the entrance and sat on the pitted sandstone. So the witch Angela was correct. There was a death in the future, he thought, staring blankly at the land. The topaz sun brought a desert heat to the early morning. A tear slid down his listless face and evaporated in the sunset, leaving a salty crust on his skin. He closed his eyes and absorbed the warmth. emptying his mind. With a fingernail, he aimlessly scratched the stone. When he looked, he saw that he had written, "Why me?" Jeez, poor Eragon. He was still there when Murtagh climbed up to the cave, carrying a pair of rabbits. Without a word, he seated himself by Eragon. "How are you?" he asked. "Very ill." Murtagh considered him thoughtfully. "Will you recover?" Eragon shrugged. After a few minutes of reflection, Murtagh said, "I dislike asking this at such a time, but I must know. Is your Braum the Braum? The one who helped steal a dragon egg from the king, chased it across the empire, and killed Morzan in a duel? I heard you say his name, and I read the inscription you put on his grave, but I must know for certain. Was that he?" "It was," said Eragon softly. A troubled expression sat on Murtagh's face. "How do you know all that? You talk about things that are secret to most, and you were trailing the Razak right when we needed help. Are you one of the Varden?" I thought I was reading as Murtagh there for a second. Sometimes books are a little confusing like that. Murtagh's eyes became inscrutable orbs. "I'm running away, like you." There was just strange sorrow in his words. "I do not belong to either the Varden or the Empire. Nor do I owe allegiance to any man but myself. As for my rescuing you, I will admit that I've heard whispered tales of a new rider, and reasoned that, by following the Razak, I might discover if they were true." "I thought you wanted to kill the Razak," said Eragon. Murtagh smiled grimly. "I do, but if I had, I never would have met you. But Braum would still be alive. I wish he were here. He would know whether to trust Murtagh." Eragon remembered how Braum had sensed Trevor's intentions in Darat, and wondered if he could do the same with Murtagh. He reached for Murtagh's consciousness, but his probe abruptly ran into an iron-hard wall. Sorry, my nose really is bugging me today. I can't wait for the summer. So yeah, he's trying to get into Murtagh's mind, but apparently Murtagh is either a magician or very strong-willed, because he's not having that. Murtagh's entire mind was fortified. How did he learn to do that? Braum said that few people, if any, could keep others out of their minds without training. So why does Murtagh have this ability? Eragon asked, "Where is Saphira?" "I don't know," said Murtagh. "She followed me for a time. I went hunting, then she flew off on her own. I haven't seen her since." Eragon rocked onto his feet and returned to the cave. Murtagh followed. "What are you going to do now?" "I'm not sure. And I don't want to think about it either." He rolled up his blankets and tied them to Kadok's saddlebags. His ribs hurt. Murtagh went to prepare the rabbits. As Eragon shifted things in his bags, he uncovered Zarok. The red sheath glinted brightly. He took out the sword, weighed it in his hands. He had never carried Zarok, nor used it in combat, except when he and Braum had sparred, because he had not wanted people to see it. That concerned Eragon no more. The Razak had seemed surprised and frightened by the sword. That was more than enough reason for him to wear it. With a shudder, he pulled off his bow and belted Zarok. "From this moment on, I'll live by the sword. Let the whole world see what I am. I have no fear. I'm a rider now, fully and completely." He sorted through Braum's bags, but found only clothes, a few odd items, and a small pouch of coins. Eragon took the map of Allegation and put the bags away, then crouched by the fire. Murtagh's eyes narrowed as he looked up from the rabbit he was skinning. "The sword. May I see it?" he asked, wiping his hands. Eragon hesitated, reluctant to relinquish the weapon for even a moment, then nodded. Murtagh examined the symbol on the blade. His face darkened. Where did you get this? Brom gave it to me. Why? Murtagh shoved the sword back and crossed his arms angrily. He was breathing hard. That sword was once as well known as its owner. The last rider to carry it was Morzan, a brutal, savage man. I thought you were a foe of the Empire, yet here I find you bearing one of the Forsworn's bloody swords. Eragon stared at Zarek with shock. He realized that Brom must have taken it from Morzan after they fought in Gilead. Brom never told me where it came from, he said truthfully. I had no idea it was Morzan's. He never told you? That's strange. I can think of no reason for him to conceal it. Neither can I, but he kept many secrets. It felt unsettling to hold the sword of the man who had betrayed the riders to Galbatorix. This blade probably killed many riders, and worse, dragons. Even so, I'm going to carry it. I don't have another sword of my own. Murtagh flinched to Eragon, said the name. It's your choice. When the meal was ready, Eragon ate slowly, though he was quite hungry. The hot food made him feel better. As they scraped out their bowls, he said, I have to sell my horse. Why not Brom's? Asked Murtagh. He seemed to have gotten over his temper. Snowfire? Because Brom promised to take care of him. Since he isn't around, I'll do it for him. Okay, that's really cute. Murtagh set his bowl in his lap. If that's what you want. I'm sure we can find a buyer in some town or village. We? Asked Eragon. You won't want to stay here for much longer. The Rozlek are nearby. Brom's tomb will be like a beacon for them. Eragon had not thought of this. And your ribs are going to take time to heal. I know you can defend yourself with magic, but you need a companion who can lift things and use a sword. I'm asking to travel with you, at least for the time being. But I must warn you, the Empire is searching for me. There will be blood over it eventually. Eragon laughed weakly and found himself crying because it hurt so much. Once his breath was back, he said, I don't care if the entire army is searching for you. You're right. I do need help. I would be glad to have you along, though I have to talk to Saphir about it. But I have to warn you, Galbatorix just might send the entire army after me. You won't be any safer with Saphir and me than if you were on your own. I know that, said Murtagh, but all the same, it won't stop me. Good. Eragon smiled with gratitude. While they spoke, Saphira crawled into the cave and greeted Eragon. She was glad to see him, but there was deep sadness in her thoughts. She laid her big blue head on the floor and asked, Are you well again? Not quite. I miss the old one. As do I. I never suspected that he was a rider. Brom, he really was an old man, as old as the Forsworn. Everything he taught me about magic he must have learned from the riders themselves. Saphira shifted slightly. I knew what he was the moment he touched me at your farm. See? At least Saphira isn't an idiot. And you didn't tell me? Why? He asked me not to, she said simply. Eragon decided not to make an issue of it. Saphira never meant to hurt him. Brom kept more than one secret, he told her, then explained about Zarok and Murtagh's reaction. I understand now why Brom didn't explain Zarok's origins. If he had, I probably would have run away from it, and him, at the first opportunity. You would do well to rid yourself of that sword. I know it's a peerless weapon, but you would be better off with a normal blade rather than Morzan's butchery tool. Perhaps, Saphira. Where does our path go from here? Murtagh offered to come with us. I don't know his past, but he seems honest enough. Should we go to the Varden now? Only, I don't know how to find them. Brahm never told us. He told me, said Saphira. Brahm just giving all the secrets to the dragon. Clearly, Brahm had a favorite. I don't think Eragon realized that his dragon was preferred by his mentor, but it's totally canon. Sorry about that. Sneeze. Alright. Why did he trust you but not me with all this knowledge? Her scales rustled over the dry rock as she stood above him. After we left TM and were attacked by the Urkels, he told me many things, some of which I will not speak of unless necessary. He was concerned about his own death and what would happen to you after it. One fact he imparted to me was the name of a man, Dormnad, who lives in Gilead. He can help us find the Varden. Brahm also wanted us to know that of all the people in Alagasia, he believed you were the best suited to inherit the Rider's legacy. Tears welled in Eragon's eyes. This was the highest praise he could ever receive from Brahm. A responsibility I will bear honorably. Good. We'll go to Gilead then, stated Eragon, with strength and purpose returning to him. And what of Murtagh? Do you think he should come with us? We owe him our lives, said Saphira. But even if that weren't so, he has seen both you and me. We should keep him close so he doesn't varnish the Empire with our location, willingly or not. He agreed with her, then told Saphira about his dream. What I saw disturbed me. I feel that time is running out for her. Something dreadful is gonna happen. She's in danger, I'm sure of it, but I don't know how to find her. She could be anywhere. What does your heart say? Asked Saphira. My heart died a while back, said Eragon, with a hint of black humor. However, I think we should go north to Gilead. With any luck, one of the towns or cities along our path is where this woman is being held. I'm afraid that my next dream of her will show a grave. I couldn't stand that. Why? I'm not sure, he said, shrugging. It's just that when I see her, I just feel as if she's precious and shouldn't be lost. It's very strange. Saphira opened her long mouth and laughed. Silently, fangs gleamed. What is it? Snapped Eragon. She shook her head and quietly patted away. Eragon grumbled to himself, then told Murtagh what they had decided. Murtagh said, If you find this Dormnad, and then continue on to the Varden, I will leave you. Encountering the Varden would be as dangerous for me as walking unarmed into Urbane with the fanfare of trumpets to announce my arrival. We won't have to part anytime soon, said Eragon. It's a long way to Gilead. His voice cracked slightly, and he squinted at the sun. We should leave before the day grows any older. Are you strong enough to travel? Asked Murtagh, frowning. I have to do something or I'll go crazy, said Eragon. The sparring, practicing magic, or sitting around twiddling my thumbs aren't good enough right now, so I'm gonna ride. They doused the fire and led the horses out of the cave. Go on. I'll be right down, Murtagh said. Eragon struggled up the sandstone, resting when his side made it impossible to breathe. When he reached the top, he found Saphira already there. They stood together before Brahm's grave and paid their last respects. I can't believe he's gone. Forever. As Eragon turned to depart, Saphira snaked her long neck to touch the tomb with the tip of her nose. Her sides vibrated as a low humming filled the air. The sandstone around her nose shimmered like a gilded dew, turning clear with dancing silver highlights. Eragon watched in wonder as tendrils of white diamond twisted over the tomb's surface in a web of priceless filigree. Sparking shadows were cast on the ground, reflecting splashes of brilliant color that shifted dazzlingly as the sandstone continued to change. With a satisfied snort, Saphira stepped back and examined her handiwork. The sculpted sandstone mausoleum of moments before had transformed into a sparkling gemstone, under which Brahm's untouched face was visible. Eragon gazed with yearning at the old man, who seemed only sleeping. "What did you do?" he asked. Saphira with awe. "I gave him the only gift I could. Now time will not ravage him. He can rest in peace for eternity." "Thank you." Eragon put a hand on her side, and they left together. Well, that is a very sad way to leave off, but I feel like it's an appropriate closure. It leaves us a lot to think about. I read quite a bit today. I'm starting to get a bit winded. But it's been a blast. I really appreciate all the company. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll be back with Eragon again next Monday.